authorized to fire at will.
Hey folks, thanks for checking in. I am sorry that we are running behind. I'm a few minutes late. I had some stuff that just uh, couldn't go undone for me to be able to start the show. So thanks for being here. Welcome to MBRR Media, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. Some of you know it as. Thanks for tuning in. Please hit that like button and the share while you're at it. And if you appreciate the content, make sure you go down there and check out the join button down below. Act localist. We're always looking for more channel members to support us. You prefer to support me through someplace other than Google, then you can join at Subscribestar Minnesota Black Robe Regiment over there. You can pick a level of support over there. I no longer have anybody coming in at show producer level. So if you would like a shout out as a show producer, there are lots of other channel members, but all of my show producer levels are now open. So if you'd like to step into that show producer level and help out with that, that would be great. We would love to have you as a show producer. And channel membership, you get discounts if you decide you want to get some merchandise. We give a 17.76, yes, 17.76% discount. I hope you guys can figure out what that is short for or what that stands for. But yeah, thanks for being here. Once again, on your way in, hit that like, hit that share. Make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. Today is I don't know how long we're gonna go. I have I have this kind of this bone to pick with the system, and I have for quite some time. But when you when you look at what I have the title of the show, hello everybody in the chat, by the way. If I don't see you, that's fine. If you have a legitimate question you'd like me to ask or answer, super chat's the best way for me to see those things, by the way. I am prone to want to go real in depth into a lot of stories over and over and over again to talk about why I do the things that I do with the content that I do. And if you're interested in any of that, you can go check out my personal playlist that explains where I'm coming from, why I do law enforcement accountability, especially why I do government accountability, especially. Um, that playlist is my fight. You'll find it very easily, and it's not easy for me to withhold that information when I'm talking about stories like what we're talking about today, because it helps groundwork. Concern that I some buffering going on. There we go. I don't want to what's going on with Blayke and his story. Not 7 months that Blayke was paralyzed and his brother Braxton was happen in a way that was unavoidable. You have to watch a whole playlist to understand that Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what happened there. um, yeah, so we're having some inclement weather. The winds are pretty bad where I'm at right now, and we're getting our first taste of winter. So, anyhow, um, on the night of April 9th, Blayke was traveling on Highway 10, coming home from some prom preparations that he was doing. He had met his girlfriend up there. They were picking out dresses, and well, not Blayke. Blayke wasn't picking out a dress, obviously. Well, I guess we can't say obviously in our society today, but he was checking on um, his tux and whatnot, and he had his brother Braxton with him, and then they had a friend with him. And on their way back, they had a minor fender bender with a older gentleman who had been driving the wrong way down Highway 10, and then turned in front of them, and they collided. And Trooper Ryan Moeser, who was responding to the wrong way driver at speeds of over 126 miles an hour, on a straight road without any without any curves, uh, with no block, nothing to obscure his view other than his speed, collided with Blayke and Braxton as they got out to check on the driver of the wrong way vehicle. In the words of Braxton, he looked up and said, "Blayke, the cops are already here." He was very confused. He could not understand why the cops are already on scene because the accident had just happened. And when he said that, the trooper made contact with their vehicle and ultimately ended up paralyzing Blayke from the neck down and giving him a traumatic brain injury. And a friend of the family's reached out to me. They'd become aware of my content because I had covered some stories out of Sherburne County, Minnesota. The Sherburne County Sheriff's Office there is a very um, troubled law enforcement agency in the state of Minnesota. And that's saying a lot right now because Minnesota law enforcement's having a lot of problems right now. Just a lot. And I'm working on covering it. Like right now, I'm at least on top of covering Blayke's story and what was done to him and done to his family. I'm working on covering at least 6 other stories right now involving law enforcement and like pure criminal behavior, constitutional violations under the color of law, uh, driving problems. I have video. I have dash cam video right now of an incident that it took my researcher over a year to be able to get the video of this incident. You have to let that sink in. Over a year. Law enforcement in Minnesota, as soon as they have video of somebody else doing something wrong, they'll release that in a heartbeat. And so I'm working on these multiple stories, and no less than 3 of these stories involve Minnesota State Patrol. And not only does one of those involve Minnesota State Patrol, on top of the story that we're dealing with here with Trooper Ryan Moeser of the Minnesota State Patrol, who criminally and negligently paralyzed Blayke Mostad, but it involves Sherburne County. So we have another story involving Sherburne County. Let this sink in. We have another story involving Sherburne County, in particular the Sherburne County Sheriff and the Minnesota State Patrol. Folks, there's a massive problem with accountability in law enforcement in the state of Minnesota. A massive problem with it. And the problem with what Minnesota's got going on is that it's rampant across the entire United States. It's just absolutely a problem across the entire U.S. Story after story after story after story after story comes in and exposes law enforcement to the searchlight of accountability. And some of you would say, well, then what's the problem if there's a spotlight on law enforcement in the US? Then where's the complaint, TC? Why are you upset? Why are you continuing to talk about the problems with law enforcement? Why are you continuing to talk about the concerns that you have when clearly something's being done? The problem, folks, is not that something's being done. The problem is that nothing's being done ultimately. The problem isn't that there's a spotlight that's beginning to shine on law enforcement. The problem is that they drag their feet until all interest is lost and everybody's able to just ignore what's going on. Look, in this case, Trooper Moeser is doing better than 126 miles an hour in clear violation of Minnesota State Statute 169.17 that says that when responding to an emergent situation, all first responders, but in particular law enforcement, have to operate with lights and sirens, but they also have to operate in consideration for the due care of the public. Due care of the public. In other words, you can run your lights and sirens. You can respond to a emergency. You can respond to a situation that needs to be responded to, but you still have to do it in such a way that it's safe, that has due regard for the well-being of your employers, the public, we the people of the state of Minnesota. That's Minnesota State Statute 169.17. Jimmy Johns, thank you very much for being here. By the way, anybody who's watching, Jimmy Johns is the screen name for Blake's grandfather. He has been an absolute warrior in this, along with Blake's family, his Blake's mom, Tricia, and Blake's sister, Bailey, and of course the brothers, and just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other people. But you have this situation where there are state statutes in every state that dictate how law enforcement is to conduct itself in an emergency situation. And over and over and over again, we see cases where they violate those and they get away with them. Covering, like I said, a story about a Minnesota State Trooper in the Rochester area. Two stories out of Rochester alone. Shane Roper, May 18th, 2024. Driving in such a criminally negligent and reckless way, he murdered Olivia Flores on May 18th of 2024 through his driving. It took months and months and months for them to finally conclude an investigation on him and charge him, and for the Minnesota State Commander, State Patrol Commander, Colonel Christina Bogovich, to terminate Shane Roper. They were waiting for him to be charged, basically. And when the handwriting was on the wall, they finally did the one thing that they had to do, which was terminate him, when they realized they were not going to be able to get away with covering it up. And now, I have a Minnesota State Trooper that caused an accident responding to an emergency in Rochester that was really not emergent, who was driving, according to the witnesses, and I'll be releasing the dash cam video of that, along with commentary, that according to the witnesses, the trooper was driving at an excessive rate of speed that was not called for in a built-up semi-commercial, semi-residential area. That took months to investigate. And so, yes, we're remembering what Trooper Ryan Moeser did to Blayke Mostad on this day 7 months ago, but we're remembering it. We're remembering it by talking about the reality that this is happening in law enforcement all over the United States. And everybody's like, well, what more do you want? What more do I want? I want people to wake up. Especially you so-called patriotic normicons, I want you guys to wake up and realize that law enforcement is not the patriotic conservative group that you think it is. Law enforcement is a group of people who is hell-bent on enforcing laws and policies for whoever the political overlords they are currently serving want. You may not like that, but it's true. The cops that you know might be decent individuals. You might get along with them just fine, but when push comes to shove, 98% of the cops that you know do not fall into the good apple category. Cops do not fall into the good apple category for the most part. Do I know a few? Absolutely. Detective Matt Thornton is a really good example of a cop who does well, and he has a YouTube channel dedicated to calling out law enforcement who are violating people's constitutional rights and breaking the laws on their own. That's what he does. But what law enforcement's doing is, even with body cams, folks, I want you to recognize we have dash cams, we have body cams, we have traffic cameras that are over and over and over again catching law enforcement, from state police to state troopers to county sheriff's offices with their deputies and their supervisors, and local PDs, municipal PDs, over and over and over again are being caught abusing the public, abusing their positions of authority, doing things that the rest of us would never get away with. They're getting caught on camera and they're still getting away with things. And that's exactly what happened with Trooper Ryan Moeser on April 9th. Just 7 short months ago. But at the same time, 7 months of a lifetime ago. With body cams, with dash cams, they're bold enough to do these things. Imagine what it was like before the dash cams, before the body cams, before all the traffic cameras. And now you want to add in law enforcement and municipalities and counties cooperating with Flock. Flock is the system that is being used by law enforcement agencies all over the United States. They're in your state right now. Flock cams are in your state right now. Flock cameras are being used to track your every move. And in one case, in the state of Texas, and while I am personally opposed to abortion on demand, period, I'm just opposed to abortion. The state of Texas used flock cameras. Law enforcement officers use flock cameras to track a woman's movement throughout the state of Texas into other states, where they claim she went and got an abortion in a neighboring state, and then when she came back to Texas, they are trying to charge her criminally with violating Texas law forbidding abortion on demand. They accessed flock cameras to do that. So even the technology that we use, body cams and dash cams and whatnot, that is supposed to help hold law enforcement accountable, now they're adding in the ability of flock cams to track people and hunt them down and charge them with crimes. Now, news just broke out of Georgia. Rebecca, thanks for being here. Rebecca is an aunt of Blayke, so everybody say hello to Rebecca. Mercedes, thanks for monitoring the chat. We have news out of Georgia of an officer who used flock cameras for personal gain. Just go look up Florida cop terminated, Georgia cop disciplined for using flock cams for personal reasons. We just had news break here in the state of Minnesota of a supervisor in the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office who was accused of stealing from his own agency. And before he could even be charged, before an investigation could be started and completed, he was allowed to resign. And now they finally announced felony charges against him. Now, how much you want to bet that those felony charges end up getting pled down and he just gets a tiny slap on the wrist because overall he had a great career? Folks, this is why I'm talking about Trooper Ryan Moeser today. Because Trooper Ryan Moeser speaks to a greater issue. Trooper Ryan Moeser, and I'm going to keep saying that, Trooper Ryan Moeser, over and over and over again. And if you want, you can go down to the change.org petition that's in the description of this video, and you can click on it, and you can sign in, and you can sign that to help Bailey and her family fight for justice for Blayke. I'm pleading with you. Help us fight for justice for Blayke to get Trooper Ryan Moeser terminated. Trooper Ryan Moeser should be terminated. But there's no justice. They stretched out the investigation for months and months and months. They tossed the investigation around. They tossed the conclusion of the investigation for charging decisions off from the Sherburne County Sheriff's Office to the Sherburne County Attorney's Office, who then after a few weeks determined that there was this conflict of interest. So they tossed it off to another county, Dakota County, who had it for a few weeks. And then they finally decided, hey, we're not going to charge Trooper Moeser here, but we are going to charge the wrong way driver, and we're going to lay the entire blame for this accident on the wrong way driver. It was two separate accidents, but they're going to blame the wrong way driver. Oh, by the way, the wrong way driver, he was an older gentleman, much older, in his 70s, who died before the charging decisions were made. So they exonerated Trooper Moeser and then laid all the blame on a 70-year-old man who simply made a mistake and hurt no one. Ultimately, he hurt no one. Poor Dale had a minor fender bender with a couple of really good kids. And now his character has been besmirched. So that law enforcement and the criminal injustice system could go and protect Trooper Ryan Moeser in the Minnesota State Patrol and Colonel Christine Blagovich. I mean, that's the reality. The truth of the matter, the reality of all of this is that ultimately all of this was done. It was dragged out. The can was kicked down the street. The buck was passed as far as it could be passed for as long as it could be passed to hide the truth that Trooper Moeser was responsible for paralyzing a 17-year-old man just weeks before his graduation, just weeks before his 18th birthday, forever and inalterably changing his life. And he's still out there working, and he drew his paycheck the entire time. And no one has even acknowledged whether or not he was written up, disciplined, placed back in a probationary period. We have no idea because he's protected. He's protected. All of this stuff surrounding Ryan Moeser, Trooper Ryan Moeser of the Minnesota State Patrol, he's protected. We're not entitled to know anything. We're not entitled to know whether or not he was disciplined in any way, shape, or form. And I understand that to some degree. I really do. You know, if you go and you look up the playlist surrounding what was done to me when I had done nothing criminal, I was protected from having what was being done to me put out on public blast. And I refrained while I was being attacked by my former employer for having a show like this. I refrained from commenting on it because I was in a fight for my life. I was in a fight for my fiscal and career life. So I kept what was happening to me on the down low for a very long time. And it was only after a settlement was reached that I exposed everything that happened to me and brought the receipts, brought the details of what was going on. And I was thankful that I had the protection of not having the discipline that was being done to me and the attack on me and my character and my ethics and my morality. I was happy to be able to have that protected until I was ready to talk about it. But the reality is that when you have a situation where you have a trooper who has paralyzed somebody, even if you have determined that he ultimately didn't violate any laws and shouldn't be held criminally responsible, you should at least let us know what you did to correct his behavior, if you did anything at all. At least put out a public statement, Colonel Christine Bogovich, of the commander of the Minnesota State Patrol, that you are addressing what is clearly an established pattern of very poor consideration for the due care and the well-being of the Minnesota general public by your troopers. We have story after story after story after story of just Minnesota State Patrol troopers alone causing accidents, some of them causing multiple accidents. Shane Roper, as I mentioned earlier in the show, Shane Roper, no less than 4 other situations where he caused severe accidents with severe damage, either to his own vehicle or to other vehicles. And in one case, he made contact with another state patrol vehicle, severely damaging that vehicle and his own vehicle. In another case, he exited, and I've traveled this route where this happened. He exited Highway 52 in Minnesota, going south through Rochester, Minnesota. He exited that Highway 52 and took a ramp and was going so fast that he went into the shredder cables on a perfectly dry road. No less than 4 other times that he was disciplined for this before he, on May 18th of 2024, slaughtered Olivia Flores. Folks, this garbage, this crap has got to stop. And this is never going to end. Like, look, if you're part of the Black Lives Matter movement and the ACAB, All Cops Are Bastards movement, you're not going to make any impact on getting any changes to law enforcement. I'm sorry, you're not. You just don't have the clout. You don't have the voice. You don't have the credibility because you look at cops and you hate them because you see cops as strictly a racist group. So Black Lives Matter sees every cop as a racist. They see every black cop as a racist. They see every Hispanic cop as a racist. They see every white cop as a racist. They see everybody in law enforcement as a racist. The ACAB group, the All Cops Are Bastard group, they have no credibility because they see every cop as a bastard simply because as a human being, they see them as bastards and they chose to go into law enforcement and say every cop is a bastard. You guys, you're never going to have any impact because you're not addressing the root reality of the problem of law enforcement. The problem of law enforcement is not that law enforcement is full of racists. Cops, by and large, law enforcement isn't full of a bunch of racist people. By and large, law enforcement isn't really full of a bunch of people who are bastards. But there is no such thing for the most part as what most people define as good cops. There are very few good cops. There are a bunch of bad apples, and anybody who's tuned in enough knows my saying on this. You don't change bad cops into good cops by putting bad cops with good cops. You change good cops into bad cops by putting all the bad cops around the good cops, and then the good cops remain what they were, which was silent cops. And that makes them not good cops. You're not a good cop if you're silent in the face of bad cops. You're a bad cop. You're a bad cop if you see someone not just violate policy and procedure and refuse to turn them in. You're a bad cop if you remain silent when you know that what they're doing is wrong morally, ethically, and constitutionally, and you don't step in and arrest that cop. And that's why I say the vast majority of cops are bad cops, because they remain silent. And to sit there and say, oh, they're bad because they're racist, or they're bad because you don't go into that career field unless you are already a bastard. You know, there's somebody asked the question, does law enforcement create psychopaths or does it attract psychopaths? And the answer to that is yes. Now, that doesn't mean every single person that is in law enforcement is clinically diagnosable with psychopathy. That's not what I'm saying. And by the way, if you see me look off to your screen left, I'm streaming to my TikTok channel, kind of for the behind the scenes. Look, the reality is that law enforcement as a career field, the institution of policing here in the United States of America is corrupt, and it corrupts every single person that gets involved. And every single person that gets involved in law enforcement will inevitably do something that violates the constitutional rights of some other person. I did it. I'm not proud. D Slaz, I would love to be able to read the entire chat, but I'm there's a lot of comments coming in, and while I appreciate what you're saying, so here, once again, it's also harder to read while people are scrolling by. It's much easier to read longer comments, and it's much easier to read comments that I can see. So that's why there's a lot of shows that don't even acknowledge comments unless there's a super chat involved, and I try not to be that guy. You might only see 4 people, but I'm streaming to multiple channels, and there are a lot more people popping in and out than you can see. So the only people that are going to be able to change law enforcement to start with are law enforcement officers, LEOs, who are sick and tired of being lumped into the ACAB racist category. That's the only way. That's the only way that it starts. And the other way that it starts is for people who are traditionally seen as being pro law enforcement start to wake up and realize that your conservative, ride the red wave group of people, Republicans, MAGA supporters, MAGA voters, for them to wake up and realize that law enforcement is not on the side of you. Like, if that's what it takes, and this is what I teach to people, especially Blake's family, and they've all heard me say this, it's back the blue until it happens to you. So many people are willing to back law enforcement all day long until they have a negative run-in with law enforcement. And then they want to go talk to other people about their experience. They want to go and talk to other people about what happened. And they won't listen. And they're like, why won't you listen to me? I'm trying to tell you what happened to me, what these cops did to me, and how these cops are dirty. And they won't listen. What's going to change law enforcement is both sides of the bird that has 2 wings here, the leftist and the rightist, the Dems and the Republicans, have got to wake up and realize that they have got to start working together on law enforcement reform, or they're all going to be victims of corrupt criminal justice system. They're all going to end up being victims of a system that is hell-bent on only representing the political class. D Slaz is, I'll bring this up. This is a really good example here. Again, January 6th cops were beaten by MAGA. I don't know. I don't know D Slaz at all. I don't know if he's been in a stream before or not, but he then brings up that, and then they were pardoned. I want to point out something. We now have verifiable proof, and I'll point this out. It was Donald Trump's FBI staged January 6th. They planted between the FBI and the Washington, D.C. Metro Police and the Capitol Police, they staged over 250 undercover, plain clothes, active law enforcement individuals who went in and admittedly instigated the crowd into the attack. No, it's not. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. This is just a fact. The FBI and active law enforcement helped instigate the truth, or the reality, that these people were going to attack. And now we have, it is true, D-Slaz, you can find the proof. You just need to get away from left-wing narratives and right-wing narratives and get to the narratives of the people who are doing the work, the libertarian-type researchers out there. They could provide that for you. It was the cops that instigated the push in. And here's the other one. January 5th, when the pipe bombs were set, we now know that it was a Metro DC cop who planted the bombs. the pipe bombs. And she left her job 6 months later and is now working for the CIA. The woman who planted the pipe bombs on January 5th went to work for the CIA. Yeah, D-Slaz, let's instigate the people to attack us. Absolutely, because cops are that dirty. Oh, see, this is another example. Most law enforcement officers are Republican, but most politicians are leftists, and cops have their hands tied from the... No, they don't. Cops do not have their hands tied. Cops choose to enforce the laws. Cops choose to enforce laws, even the laws that violate people's constitutional rights. State of Minnesota alone, it's a perfect example. There is not a single cop, there's not a single law enforcement agency that refuses to enforce red flag legislation. Red flag legislation says you have no due process rights. If we determine that you are unsafe, if we determine that you can't be trusted to have a gun, we're going to come take that gun from you, even if it means using force. And this is the reality of law enforcement across the board. Whether it's your local sheriff's office like Sherburne County covering for Trooper Ryan Moeser, or it's Minnesota State Patrol covering and protecting Trooper Shane Roper when he was clearly a problem well before he murdered Olivia Flores. Or it's the FBI agents in Michigan who fabricated and orchestrated a fake kidnapping plot. And once again, very good friend of mine, Radix Verum, documentary investigative journalist, proved that the fake Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot was all orchestrated by the FBI. I interviewed Steve Friend, an former FBI agent who was terminated for stepping away and saying, I will not take part in this anymore. He was part of the SWAT team that went in to make the arrest and had to say, what in the hell is going on here? This is all a setup. It's over and over and over again. And I'm seeing, so End Woke Insanity is over here talking about how conservative cops are. They're not. Cops are not conservative. You're at best, and this is part of that blindness that the right-wing, hardcore mega types who think they're anti-woke, they're just their own form of woke. They all believe that cops are on their side. We got D Slaz over here talking about how it's okay for cops to take people's guns. Let that sink in. This is the leftist mindset. He's now defending law enforcement when he came in and was just blathering on about how horrible law enforcement is. But now he's defending law enforcement when we have documentation that law enforcement was involved in orchestrating January 6th. Trump's own FBI helped set that up. So we've got a right-winger and a left-winger in this stream right now, both defending cops because they want a particular agenda. And this is the reality of law enforcement. And this is why I'm never going to forget Blayke's case. This is why I'm never, ever, ever going to be able to forget what was done to Blayke. You had a dirty cop doing 126 miles an hour, responding to a wrong way driver in an attempt to intercept him on a highway that even at night is relatively busy, driving so fast that he could not avoid another accident, and then caused a second accident by his reckless and criminal negligent behavior. And forever altered. And I will not say, you will never hear me say again, ruined Blayke's life. Is Blayke's life inalterably changed? Yes. Is Blayke's family life inalterably changed? Yes. Blayke's family life is inalterably changed. No arguments. But it's not ruined. Because Blayke is still alive. And I believe that Blayke is going to be a catalyst for change in law enforcement in Minnesota. I believe that what Trooper Ryan Moeser did to Blayke is going to be the seed that awakens your everyday I back the blue crowd to finally say enough of this shit. Enough of cops getting away with murdering people. Enough of cops getting away with selective enforcement of the law, letting their buddies get away with things. I believe that it's all going to change. Because I believe that people like his sister Bailey and his aunt Rebecca and his grandmother Vicky and his grandfather Jimmy John and his mother Trisha are not going to give up the fight until something happens to Trooper Ryan Moeser that causes a change in how we address cops and their clear protection from accountability. We can have all the body cams in the world. We can have all the dash cams in the world. We can have all of the data in the world, but until a large percentage of people, left and right, come together and meet in that sweet spot of libertarian virtue, that sweet spot of libertarian values that say my freedom, my constitutionally enshrined natural rights are far more important than anything a cop will ever do, ever. When the left and the right, when the Marxist and the authoritarian Marxist and the authoritarian right get together and say we're dismissing all of that and we're going to embrace liberty, we're going to embrace natural rights, and we're going to start holding cops accountable because they should be held to a standard 10, 12, 13, 14, 100 times higher than what everybody else is held to because they are responsible for enforcing laws that they themselves break on a regular basis. Once that starts to happen, then everything changes, and then we can have police and law enforcement reform. And it starts by going in and removing qualified immunity from every single person in the public sector, but especially starting with law enforcement. Be damned qualified immunity. You want to work as a cop in Minnesota? You want to work as a cop in South Dakota or North Dakota or anywhere in the United States at any level from the from the municipal level to the county level to the state level to the federal level. If you want to be in a law enforcement capacity, you get no qualified immunity. You buy your own bonding insurance to protect yourself from lawsuits. No more putting it on the backs of the taxpayers. No more hiding underneath the cloak of the wage slave tax cattle so that you don't have to pay for the shit that you do. So that you don't have to worry about paying the medical bills for a Blayke Mostad when you've paralyzed him and his family has got to destroy all of their savings and all of their earnings and all of their hard-won income to find a way to make him better out of their own pockets. Qualified immunity has got to end. Accountability has got to begin when people begin to wake up. I'm covering a story from southeast Minnesota right now that involves a cop violating the threshold of someone's door in a non-emergent situation and escorting a social worker into the house based on nothing more than a phone call from another social worker. And a family had their child kidnapped from them in front of them with the cop doing the kidnapping on nothing more than hearsay. Hearsay. Folks, Blayke Mostad did not suffer the paralyzation that he suffered. Blayke didn't suffer the traumatic brain injury that he suffered in a vacuum. What happened to Blayke happened because we have had decades and decades and decades and decades of cops, especially in Minnesota, getting away with doing whatever the damn hell they wanted to do. Over and over and over and over and over again, cops are protected. They're protected. I told the story just in the last year of Kandiyohi County Sheriff's Deputy Christopher Flatten, who prior to that had been a Wilmer town cop for almost 17 years, beat the brakes off of a guy with 7 other cops. And they got away with it. Charged him criminally for something that he hadn't done. And then they charged him with resisting arrest after they beat the living crap out of him in Wilmer several years ago. And when the handwriting was on the wall and they realized they were going to be facing a lawsuit, he left Wilmer and went to work for Kandiyohi County. Christopher Flatten. Go look up my stories on Christopher Flatten here on this channel. And then he went out and he got drunk on duty and drove his squad down the road, ultimately having a single vehicle accident. And in interviewing other deputies, one of the deputies said, I smelled the alcohol on him before he got in his squad, but I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to do. And I had smelled it before. That's why Christopher Flatten is exactly why Trooper Ryan Moeser was able to almost murder Blayke 7 months ago today. And you're like, well, what's the link? Because cops have become entitled to the protection of other cops. Other cops watching out for them when they're clearly doing things wrong. And I don't mean just violating policy. I mean violating the law. If there's one place I'm ever happy to see a cop, it's pulling over a drunk. I want you to understand, when I know that a person is driving under the influence, and folks, if you have never followed a person who's drunk, it's an experience. It's an exercise in terror is what it is. having them in front of you or behind you. You literally fear for your life. Just a month and a half ago, I followed one for 20 miles, staying behind him because I was terrified to try and get around him. And he was driving at like 40 miles an hour and was nowhere on the road in a reasonable sense. If there's ever a place I'm happy to see a cop, it's pulling over a drunk driver and taking them into custody because, in my opinion, drunk driving is attempted murder. And Christopher Flatton in Kandiyohi County was attempting to murder people countless times just in that night alone when he wrecked his own squad car. And by the admission of a female deputy that he worked with, she had smelled alcohol on him at other times. So that means that other times he had attempted to murder other people in his squad car in his official capacity as a deputy. And it is exactly why Trooper Ryan Moeser was able It was exactly why Trooper Ryan Moeser was able to do what he did. Hey, look, the TikTok wants me to. There, sorry. Keep that stream going. Christopher Flatton had gotten away with beating the brakes off of a young man 2 years prior to going to the Kandiyohi County Sheriff's Office, where he then proceeded to get drunk on a regular basis and drive and try to kill other people before he ultimately ended up wrecking his squad car. Fortunately, not hurting anybody else. That kind of behavior is what leads to people like Trooper Ryan Moeser and Trooper Shane Roper and Trooper Tom Wright. I'm going to throw his name out there now because that's one of the next stories I'm going to be bringing out. Folks, over and over and over and over again, these things happen and they get pushed off. The media doesn't cover them. Good luck. Try and find a story about what Trooper Ryan Moeser did to Blayke Mostad. Go and look it up in the media. Go and see how many actual news reports there are on Trooper Ryan Moeser and what he did. Go look it up. I dare you. I challenge you. Go look it up and find it. Go and find the story. Oh, Jimmy Johns, thank you so much. You have no idea. I know how hard you work for your money, and what you've had to put up with, and what you and your family have done for Blayke. So that's one of the greatest gifts I've ever gotten. Thank you very much. These things happen constantly because cop after cop after cop after cop after cop in the state of Minnesota and across the United States, they get everything covered up and over and over and over again. Even if they get removed from an agency, they'll just go a few counties over or a few cities away or 2 or 3 hours away, or maybe they'll move to another state and they'll take their certification with them and they get rehired and they just keep going. Last summer, a deputy in Illinois shot Sonia Massey in the head because she said, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." Do you know how many jobs in law enforcement Sean Grayson had before he murdered Sonia Massey? No less than 4. I've heard rumors it may have been 6. No less than 4, with maybe as many as 6 other jobs in law enforcement. Folks, I don't care what side of the political aisle you're on. I don't care if you consider yourself a Democrat. I don't care if you consider yourself a Republican. I don't care if you consider yourself unaffiliated, but you consider yourself a traditional, conservative, or you're more of a left-leaning independent. I don't care what side you're on. It's time for every single one of us to wake up and realize that cops are not on our side. They're not on our side. They're on their own side, and they're on the side of whatever politician is in charge of the area that they work in or where they live. They will do whatever they have to do to keep their jobs. They get told to shut down your business because there's a virus going around. They'll shut down your business. They're not afraid because they're protected by the system. You don't believe me? Too bad. I have story after story after story on my channel of people who suffered at the hands of law enforcement during COVID. All of that happens, and that leads to a trooper, Ryan Moeser, nearly murdering Blayke Mostad and his brother Braxton, only for them to be able to pin it on poor Dale. So no, I have not forgotten what happened to Blayke 7 months ago today. And I am not going away. If I ever get my hands on the dash cam video, and I have sources, if I ever get my hands on the dash cam video, we are going to embarrass the living shit out of Trooper Ryan Moeser and Colonel Christina Begovic in the Minnesota State Patrol. I won't show you the actual impact, but I will show you everything leading up to it. Just a little over a month ago, I was able to meet Blayke face to face. He didn't know me from Adam. He has no idea who I am. But Blayke's got better things to do than to watch my show. But I was also able to meet his family in person for the first time. October 4th. What I saw that day was a resilient family that against all odds is fighting to end an abusive system that protects the criminally guilty. I will never be the answer to their problem. I'm never going to be the one that can fix the system. I can't fix it on my own. But I'll tell you what I can do. I can tell their stories. I can tell you about what they're going through. I can tell you what they're doing to fight for justice, because their fight for justice for Blayke is not just a fight for Blayke. It is a fight to reform the system, to reform the corruption in law enforcement. And if you can watch this stream, if you can go and you watch the entire playlist and everything that has happened just to Blayke and Braxton and the Mostad family and all of the people that they care about and all of the people that are in their circle, if you can watch that and you can sit here and tell me that you don't believe that law enforcement as an institution, the institution of policing in the United States, in the state of Minnesota, is not corrupt, then there's no hope for you. You are the person who, as much as you scream, my rights, my natural rights, my gun rights, my freedom of speech rights, my right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure, my right to be free from undue punishment, no matter what you scream. No matter how many times you scream it or how you scream it, you are the person who, if you can look at law enforcement right now and say it is not corrupt across the entire United States, then you will be the first person to lay down and roll over when the cops come to your house to take your guns from you, when their political masters, their political overlords tell you that you are no longer allowed to have your firearms. You will be the first people to roll over when they tell you you're not allowed to leave your house because something is dangerous for you, and you're going to say, well, but what about? And they're going to go, well, this is for your own safety and for your own well-being. You must comply. That's why Blayke's story is so important. Blayke's story is important because it impacts the future, and we must all get behind fighting for justice for Blayke. Go to the link, to the change.org link, or change.org link. That's linked in the description of this video. Sign the petition and then share it with other people and tell them to read the beautiful tribute to Blayke and Braxton, demanding that Trooper Ryan Moeser be terminated, and tell me that you are not moved to get involved, to begin to demand actual justice, and to begin to demand actual accountability, and to begin to demand actual reform in the system. It has got to stop. And the way to stop it is for all of us to get out of our cloistered echo chambers of left versus right, Republican versus Democrat, MAGA versus non-MAGA, whatever the case might be, and come together and demand that the people who have the monopoly on violence, the monopoly on force, government, law enforcement agents with badges and guns, be held to a higher standard than they are currently held to. Until you're willing to say that, you are not ever going to be part of the solution. You will always be part of the problem. And Blayke deserves better. And until we can change the system through what happened to Blayke, it's going to keep happening to more and more and more people. And I will not go quietly into the night. I will rage and rage and rage against the dying of the light. If you don't know the poem, you should read it. Help me help Blayke's family fight for justice. In the description of the video, once again, is the change.org petition. And then there's also a link. This is not a sponsored ad, but if you want to help support me and you don't want to become a channel member and you don't want to do a super chat, there is a link to Upside, which helps you get money back on qualified purchases. I use mine exclusively for putting fuel in my car. If you follow that link and you get your Upside set up, you make your first purchase off of using my link, you get an extra, I think it's like 10 or 15 cents back per gallon. And then I also get a perk for that as well. So go and find that Upside link in the description of this video. If you like what I do and you want to continue to support me, like I said, you can go to Subscribestar. You can also become a channel member here by hitting that join button. Looking for another show producer level credit, and I'm going to be continuing to put out more and more videos that channel members only have access to for anywhere from 24 hours to 7 days ahead of everybody else. Most of those are shorts, but you will have access to those. And I'm going to also be doing some members only streams coming up pretty soon, especially now with winter being here and me not having nearly as much yard work that needs to be done. Once again, help me help Bailey and Trisha, help Blayke fight for justice. And let's really start talking about law enforcement reform and focus on how we got to a place where Trooper Ryan Moeser felt comfortable doing what he did, and how the system has been built on the backs of failure after failure after failure to protect criminally negligent, criminally irresponsible cops throughout the entire country, but especially in the state of Minnesota. So, my friends, thank you for being here. Thanks for tuning in and listening to what I had to say. And I hope that you'll share this out and that you'll tell people to come back and listen. So until next time, my friends, fight for your freedom. It is yours. Fight for your liberty. It belongs to you. Sic semper tyrannis.
We are go for liftoff in T-30. Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. Secondary guidance systems engaged. Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark. All systems are a go. All systems are a go. Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at